Hello, good afternoon. Looking to run through how to create your own personalized warm up in this session. Now, I'm going to keep this as brief as possible. Now, I know most of the people who want to be here are at inconvenient time, and that's fine. I'm going to run through it, and any of you guys in my training program can contact me over email with any questions. Anyone who's not in those programs, who are not in those programs, can ask questions here and in the comments if you're watching this later on. Now, what I want to do here is run through my system of creating your own personal warm-ups. I'm doing this because I see a lot of people running through either super long warm-ups or super short warm-ups. I probably should ask if people who are here can actually hear me, but I've never done this before. I'm going to assume that it's all fine. Now, in terms of super long warm-ups, something comes to mind in terms of I used to work at a gym where I shared some floor space, and at that time, I would have to wait till some of the other trainers finished. I came in one day and there was a guy sweating, hammering through his warm up. I asked him how long he had to go, and he said, probably I'm 20 minutes in, thinking it was 20 minutes into his warm up. So I was like, okay, you'll be done in an hour. He was 20 minutes into a 45-minute warm up. And that made me question. Firstly, he had a lot of stuff he probably should be sorting out in terms of not having to do such a long warm up. But once we're doing warm ups of this sort of length, we're cutting into any sort of gains we're going to get from the training session, or cutting into maybe even fatigue elements from a sport performance session as well. So I want to show you how to make a concise and meaningful warm up, and running through a bit of a system that I've created here. And you should have, and if you don't, there's a link below in this video where you can find that template. Now, I would have loved to have printed it out, but my kids have used all the ink in the printer, so I've got it on my phone here. So I'll be referring to that a couple of times in. But when it comes to warm-ups, there's a lot of misconceptions. And one of them is that, the lion in the jungle doesn't have to warm up to go and chase his prey, and that's fine. But the lion also didn't bust his hip doing a nut bush on a table at his mate's 21st. So sometimes we've got things that mean that we have to prepare ourselves a little bit more. And oftentimes in my clinic here, I'll give people routines to do before their sport. And they'll sometimes ask me things like, how long do I need to do this for? And I'm like, forever. If you want to be able to do your sport injury-free or train injury-free, you need to do the right things to prepare for it. Now, ideally, also doing the right things in terms of your training and not using the warm-up session as a rehab session, which is another mistake that I see. People go, I've got these lists of things that I need to do in order to improve my hip movement, my knee, whatever. The warm-up isn't the time to do that. It might be if they're relevant to what you're about to do, but that also needs to be dedicated time for improving your movement, your range of motion, and all those sorts of things. And on that note, often people will do their range of motion training in the warm-up as well. The warm-up isn't the time to create adaptations around strength, range of motion, or anything else. It's all about what you're about to do. This does change if the warm-up is for a strength training session or a rehab-based session. You can certainly put your stretches and your rehab exercises into that. But when it comes to warming up for a sport or something where performance needs to be optimal, it's all about what's about to happen from there. So there'll be a bit of a checklist you can run through in terms of the demands that are required for what you're about to do as to whether you can put your stretches and your rehab things in there. And that's certainly questions that I can answer from, especially some of you guys in the programs who do have a bunch of issues that you're working through. You can ask me about that either here or later on. Now, we need to understand what is the purpose of a warm-up. Now, one of the things is we're trying to increase temperature. One of those reasons being we're trying to increase tissue viscosity. And this is things like foam rollers and things like that. People talk about how they improve their range of motion. These things are very temporary changes. And this is through addressing the viscous materials or viscous properties of tissue. So we're warming them up, they're able to move better, and that's one of the reasons that we do a warm up. We want to also improve our neural readiness, so our coordination, our ability to both coordinate our movements as well as prime fast movements if that's part of the goal. We're also looking at improving our muscle tendon behavior. One of the interesting things about tendons is that people talk about having stiff or compliant tendons. These properties are they they are transient in some ways. So we can see tendon properties change based on what you're doing, and we can certainly make your tendons more compliant as a result of what we're going to do in our wall and kinetics, and also upregulate enzymes that are utilizing fuel sources. So these are all things that are important in a warm up. And one of the reasons why things just like having a bit of a quick stretch, even though stretching is a big thing that I teach, stretching, a warm up isn't a time for stretching. We can certainly put those things in our warm up, as we're going to see, and we should be putting them in if needed. But I don't believe in just a general stretch. In a warm up, anytime you're doing any sort of stretching, it's got to be a very, very targeted, purposeful placement of that stretching, and also ensuring that we don't have any detrimental effects of that stretching as well. Now, in the worksheet, I don't know if there's any point in me showing this because it's pretty small, but we first look at what the demands of the upcoming session are. So we've got to choose, whether we're low, moderate, high intensity, duration, and the type, from steady state to hill work. Obviously, we're looking at running and some of those things, but you could certainly tick off what those demands are within the session you're going to do. We need to understand that if it's going to be a hard, intense session, we probably want to do some sort of priming work beforehand, especially if it's going to be a hard, short session. There's no point us doing a 50-minute warm-up for maybe doing some 20, 30-meter sprints. But we do want to do some sort of priming that's improving our neural capacity to move very quickly there. So that should be fairly logical, right? I think the thing that is really important for me to run through on this session is looking at step 2, which is our limiter check. Now, on the template here, I've got a few examples of limiter checks. I've got some knee to wall, body weight squats, pogo hops, wall slides, these sorts of things. Things that are easy to execute, but not things that I necessarily use very much. Now, the beauty of this step in the warm-up is having a movement that you can assess that is also probably going to be involved in the sport itself, and a movement that you know well. And when I say that, it's a movement that you know how you normally do it. Now, bodyweight squat is great, but I'm going to show you a few specific things that I'll usually do as part of my assessment initially with some of my clients, and things that I do myself. Because we need to understand that our body is going to change on a day-to-day basis, depending on what we've done the day before or even immediately prior. If we come into one of these limiting checks and we uncover an issue, we want to make sure that what we're going to do after this clears those issues. If we get to the end of our warm-up and that issue is still there, then that's not a green light to continue. And you'll see at the bottom, step 5 of our warm-up protocol is green light test. So we want to make sure we have pain less than 3 out of 10. We feel like we're relatively symmetrical in terms of our own movement, and that our movements are smooth and snappy. And by that, I mean we're not guarding anything, and we feel like we can move freely through our full range of motion. So some things that we can easily run through in terms of some of our limiting checks. So obviously our body weight squat, so hands overhead, coming down, and trying to understand, has that changed based on how you may have done it before? So just performing it and asking yourself, what feels tight? Is it the same limiting factor that I normally have? The things that I like to look at are, can I move through my pelvis here? Now, these are much more specific checks of joint ranges of motion, but they do require global movement. So what's happening at my ankle may inhibit my ability to do this with my pelvis. You could try this now. This isn't an easy thing to do. You might start just with a full body rotation here, almost like the end of a golf swing, right? I've got my foot off the ground. I'm not sure if you can see that. My foot off the ground, I'm turning as far as I can to one side, turning as far as I can to one side. That alone is probably going to give you a little bit of information, but then I want to see, can I isolate my pelvis? And I might find, usually I'm all right moving here, but today I get a little bit of pain in my back or something stopping me. So in that case, I'm going to try and find what it is that's limiting me. I might get to here and go, actually I feel a little bit tight in my hip here. So that's when I'm going to go into the next stage of my assessment or of my warm-up protocol, where I'm looking at my 60-second fixes. And to be fair, it's usually going to be more than 60 seconds, but I'm going to give you a few other examples first. I might also look at my rib cage movement. Can I move well through here without any pain? And am I pretty well in the same sort of range that I normally would be? I might look at tilting through my back and my rib cage. Am I pain-free? Do I feel like I normally would? And we could also bring this into other, joint movements too, arms, legs, and you need to figure out what is specific to what you're about to do. So let's say it is my, let's say I did feel like I was limited in my movement over to the left here with my pelvis, and decided that I'm a little bit tight through here. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to do a stretch of that tissue. And at this stage, people usually ask me things like, isn't stretching bad in a warm-up? And there's been a lot of research on this area. And the early research that looked at stretching in warm-ups decided that it was detrimental effect was based on military studies, and stretchers were being held for 20, 30 minutes or more, placed in a spin and held there, and then getting people out of these positions and then getting them jumping. No surprise, they felt pretty rubbish coming out of a held stretch for 20 minutes and then jumping. Subsequent studies have looked at detrimental effects from shorter duration stretches as well, and we've come to the conclusion that anything under a minute is probably fine. But in real life, if you look at what people are doing pre-sport, holding a bit of a stretch of their arm, probably doing 10, 15-second stretches anyway. If you're doing a stretch for under 60 seconds, there's probably no detrimental effect of what's going to happen in your sport. But if you are holding a stretch for more than 60 seconds and then you follow that up with some movement, so let's say I stretch my pec here, hold it for a minute, and then I follow it up with these sort of movements, there's no longer any detrimental effect of that stretch itself. So we can safely put stretches into our warm-up if we understand less than 60 seconds and follow up with some dynamic movement, which is why in this limiter, in a 60-second fix, we do the stretch, we do an isometric, and then we do a dynamic movement, making sure that we are ensuring there's no poor effects from that stretch. Having said that, I also said before, I don't believe in a general stretch in a warm-up. Unless the sport you're about to do has some range of motion requirements, it might be dancing or it might be something where you need to hit big ranges of motion, you don't need to stretch in that warm-up unless you've gone to this limiter check and you've gone, hey, I don't move as well here, I should stretch this tissue. So if I was going to do the hip, I might come into something like a lunge. I'm going to bring this hip under. Knowing that there's also this lateral tissue, I'm going to move to the side of it. I might come here, going to hold a stretch for 30 seconds or so, and then I'm going to do an isometric here. So with an isometric, what that is we're holding tension in the tissue against the direction this muscle wants to move. So here, I can push my toe into the ground as though I'm kicking up here, and I can start to get a strong isometric targeted towards this tissue. I might even pull my front foot back. I'll probably do that on the ground, but the reason that I'm not is because you probably can't see me very well as I do. So I'm going to dress this tissue, and I might just bring that into some leg swings. I might do some walking lunges, something dynamic before coming into the next stage of my warm-up. Now, this is only if you have an issue in your limiting test. Otherwise, we go straight through to the ramp warm-up. So this is what most people are going to do most of the time. We're going to raise, activate, mobilize, and potentiate. So raising is ideally something similar to what you're about to do, unless fatigue is an issue. So if you need to do, let's say, some 100-meter sprints, and you're looking for your highest performance, you're not going to go and jog for a K prior. You may do some things like some pogo hops and these sorts of things, which also could have some potentiation effects. But we don't want to be doing super long raising of temperature and heart rate. Usually a few minutes is fine. So activating, here's where I'd ideally like to do some isometrics for very short durations, probably 10 seconds or under for isometrics, and you probably don't need to do 2 to 4 minutes and get out of these a little bit quicker. So let's say part of what I was about to do was some sprinting, and I wanted to get some glute activation. I might come into something like this position here. I'm going to rotate forward, push my big toe into the ground, and push my heel into the ground. I'm just holding here. I'm coming out, doing a bit of a rotation here, coming forward, and feeling this glute fire up. I'm doing 10-second reps there. I might do that in a few different planes. I might do my hamstrings as well. I could do it from here too. Heel on the ground, coming forward, and driving that heel back. So I'm making sure that I'm getting good neural connection with these muscles. Isometrics are very powerful for this. And they're also very good if you're addressing an issue within these muscles as well, because they have an analgesic effect. Then mobilizing, I'm ideally looking to do something that looks similar to what my sport is. So I might do some, little jogging steps. There might be a running technique that I've been working on. I might come through that and practice some starts. And potentiation, we're looking to do something ideally that is either high demand in terms of contraction or fast and slow. Now, this depends on what you're about to do next. There's been some research into, a lot of the research was on the swimmers. Starts off the mark, but you're not going to do that if you're coming into like a power lift or something like that. You probably want to do some very fast short reps to potentiate that rather than coming into something heavy. As I said, you can ask these questions to me later, but I'm trying to hammer through this because I know I'm going to get asked all this soon anyway. So your green light is in pain, less than 3 hours. You want to make sure you feel as though things are relatively symmetrical. You anyway. I don't mean in terms of the world, just what your normal is, and that movements are, and you're not nursing anything. So that is through that today, but through the ramp protocol and perfect warm-up builder. Now, if you don't have any issues, you're probably pretty sweet just to go through the straight through the ramp protocol. Otherwise, probably should do the clearing test anyway, and then you can just proceed. But for me, that clearing test is a really important part of this warm-up protocol, because that's how we're going to know if we're addressing any issues before they come up. Because so often, people are just going into some training with an underlying issue that just gets worse and worse, and that's how they end up in here looking for help from me. So that would certainly be something that you're going to save yourself a lot of time and trouble if you red flag it to yourself before you actually get into the rest of your prep routine. So if there's any questions now from the people who are here, I'm happy to answer them. Otherwise, I hammered through that quicker than what I thought. So hopefully get out of here in half an hour. Otherwise, I'll probably leave this video up. I'm sure I'm going to leave it up, or I'm just going to send it to the people who missed it, and you can respond in emails to me, or if it's still up, I'm happy for you to ask questions in the comments, or I don't know, private message on this YouTube thing. I don't know. Yeah, sweet. I'm going to go then, have some lunch, and if you have any questions about that, I'd really like to hear about people who are trying to use it. Um, I know a lot of the people who have registered for this are coaches and trainers looking to take this themselves, and that's fine. If you've got any questions about how you're using it with your athletes and your coaches in your, please let me know. Awesome. Bye.